Sergeant Mason Hale had spent years following rules, waking up before sunrise and training until his muscles felt heavy. He liked his routine. It gave him a sense of control, something he always needed in a world that changed too quickly. So when his commander called him into the briefing room one quiet morning, Mason expected the usual update about schedules or equipment. Nothing more. Nothing less. But that day, everything shifted. His commander, a calm and serious man named Captain Rourke, looked at Mason with an expression that was hard to read. It wasn't quite concern, and it wasn't disappointment either. It was something in between. Mason stood straight, waiting for instructions, thinking he was about to be assigned to maintenance duty or another patrol around the outer field. Instead, Captain Rourke cleared his throat and said, "Sergeant Hale, you've been assigned a new partner. An alien companion from the Varan delegation." Mason blinked. He thought he had misheard. "A what, sir?" "A Varan," the captain repeated. "She will live here, train with you, and learn from you. This is part of the new cooperation program." Mason's mind filled with questions. Why him? Why a companion? Why now? He had heard about the Varan species stall. Graceful beings with shimmering patterns on their skin and eyes that seemed to see more than humans could imagine. The humans called the program a cultural bridge. The Varan called it a path of learning. Mason called it unexpected. He had never worked closely with anyone outside his own team, let alone someone from another world. He didn't dislike them, but he had no idea how he was supposed to teach or guide someone whose life and experiences were completely different from his. Captain Rourke continued talking, explaining the schedule, the goals, and the rules. But Mason barely heard anything after that first sentence. A part of him wondered if he was being tested. Another part worried he wasn't ready. But soldiers didn't say no, and Mason wasn't someone who backed down from responsibility. "Yes, sir," he replied. Later that morning, Mason walked across the wide training yard toward the arrival area. He saw a small group of people gathered near the landing platform, all waiting quietly. In the distance, a silver shuttle glided down with a soft hum and settled gently onto the ground. A cool breeze swept across the yard, carrying with it a faint, unfamiliar scent, something like crisp air after rain mixed with a sweet floral note. The shuttle door opened, and a young Varan stepped out. She was slender, wearing a smooth, dark uniform made from a material Mason had never seen before. Her skin had a soft glow, and pale blue lines curved along her arms like natural patterns. Her eyes were calm but alert, as if she was studying everything at once. She looked peaceful, but also unsure, like she was stepping into a world she didn't fully understand. "That's Lyra," someone whispered beside Mason. So this was the companion Lyra. When her gaze finally met Mason's, he felt a strange mix of curiosity and hesitation. She didn't smile, but she didn't look unfriendly either. She simply studied him with quiet interest. Captain Rourke introduced them, saying, "Sergeant Hale will be your trainer and partner. He will guide you through your daily tasks and help you understand our systems." Lyra bowed her head, slightly a gesture of respect from her culture. "I am honored," she said softly. Her voice had a musical quality, almost like a gentle echo that lingered for a moment. Mason nodded politely. "I'll do my best to help." Their first moments together were stiff and formal. Neither knew what to say. Mason had prepared a few questions in his mind. Simple things like, "How was your trip?" or "Do you need anything?" But none of them felt right. Lyra seemed equally unsure. She stayed quiet, looking around as if trying to memorize every detail of her new surroundings. Mason guided her through the base, pointing out important areas: training rooms, communication centers, the dining hall, and the small living quarters where she would stay. Lyra listened carefully, occasionally touching the walls or observing the technology with fascination. She didn't ask many questions, but every time she did, her curiosity felt genuine. "Why do humans store tools in separate rooms?" she asked at one point. "It helps keep everything organized," Mason explained, "and it makes it easier to find what we need. In my home, tools are placed in open spaces so everyone can reach them quickly," she replied thoughtfully. Her calm way of speaking made even simple statements sound meaningful. Mason found himself trying to understand her perspective, even when it was different from his own. Later in the day, Mason brought Lyra to the training field for their first session. It wasn't meant to be intense, just light practice to understand each other's rhythm. But even simple drills turned out to be more complicated than he expected. Human equipment was unfamiliar to her. The protective pads felt too heavy. The communication device buzzed unexpectedly in her hand, startling her. And when Mason asked her to follow a basic movement pattern, she moved too smoothly, almost dancing, instead of keeping the firm, grounded posture humans used. Mason tried to correct her, but his words came out sharper than he intended. He wasn't angry at her, just confused and worried he was doing a poor job. Lyra paused and lowered her head slightly. "I apologize," she said quietly. "On my world, we move with fluid steps. I will try to be more human." Her words made Mason feel a small twist of guilt. He hadn't meant to make her feel inadequate. "Hey," he said gently, softening his tone. "You don't need to be more human. Just try to follow the steps. We'll figure it out together." She looked at him again, this time with a flicker of relief. They continued training, slowly finding a rhythm. Sometimes she moved too quickly. Sometimes Mason explained too much. But little by little, they began adjusting to each other's pace. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad either. By evening, both were tired, but in a calmer mood. Mason walked her back to her quarters. Lyra paused at the doorway, looking at him with a thoughtful expression. "Today was difficult for me," she admitted, "but I am grateful for your guidance." Mason nodded. "It was new for both of us. We'll get better." She gave a small, sincere smile, her first one of the day. When Mason returned to his room, he felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. Their partnership was still new, still awkward, and still full of misunderstandings. But something inside him told him this assignment would be important, even if he didn't yet know why. Far away in her room, Lyra touched the smooth surface of her wall panel, watching it glow softly under her fingers. She thought about the human soldier who had spoken with patience even when he didn't know how to guide her perfectly. She had been taught that humans were unpredictable, quick to judge, and difficult to understand. But Mason Hale seemed steady, careful, and quietly kind. She lay down on her resting pad, wondering what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know it yet, but this assignment would change her life in ways she could never imagine. And somewhere inside the quiet outpost of Delta Horizon, the beginning of an unusual and powerful bond had just been formed, one built not on shared history, but on two very different beings trying, step by small step, to understand each other. The next morning, Mason woke up earlier than usual. He wasn't sure if it was excitement, worry, or simple habit. But his mind had been busy ever since he met Lyra. He felt responsible for her success. She was new to the base, new to the environment, and new to human routines. If she struggled, people would blame the program and, maybe even him. He didn't want that to happen. He wanted things to go smoothly, even if he wasn't fully confident about how to train an alien companion. After a quick breakfast, he walked to the training yard. Lyra was already there, standing quietly with her hands folded. She looked calm, almost too calm, like she'd been waiting for a long time. Soft lines on her arms glowed faintly in the early light, shifting gently as she breathed. "You're early," Mason said. Lyra turned toward him with a polite nod. "I wish to practice the movement pattern you showed me yesterday." "Oh, well, that's good," Mason replied, surprised but impressed. "Show me what you've got." She stepped forward and carefully performed the same pattern. This time, her movements were less fluid and more structured. She was trying very hard to match the human style, and for the most part, she did well. Mason nodded approvingly. "Much better," he said, "but don't worry about being perfect. You'll get there." Lyra relaxed slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. They began the day's training. Mason explained the functions of different tools, while Lyra listened with sincere focus. Yet despite her effort, human technology continued to confuse her. At one point, she picked up a scanner and accidentally activated a loud, alert tone that echoed across the field. She jumped in surprise, dropping the device onto the soft ground. Mason, trying not to laugh, walked over and shut it off. It's okay, he said gently. These things happen. She looked embarrassed. Your devices are very sensitive. Sometimes too sensitive, Mason admitted with a smile. Don't worry. You'll get used to them. Throughout the morning, Lyra tried different equipment grips, sensors, tracker pads, and, each time, she learned a little more. Mason noticed something interesting. She remembered every mistake and never repeated it. Her learning style was different from humans. She processed information deeply, turning errors into quick improvements. As the sun climbed higher, they took a short break under the shade of a tall metal canopy. Lyra stood quietly, watching a group of human trainees practicing nearby. They move differently than us, she said thoughtfully. Humans use strength in a direct way. We use it in a flowing way. I am trying to understand your style, Mason said. Sipping water, we could learn from you too. Your movements are smoother than anything I've seen. Her eyes brightened slightly. Really? Yeah, he said. You're naturally graceful. I think if we combine your style with our style, we might end up with something better. Lyra seemed to consider this. I would like that. After break, they walked to the outer fields for a supply run. It was a simple task, collecting a set of crates from a nearby station and bringing them back to the base, but it gave them time to talk. And for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel uncomfortable. Lyra looked around as they walked, studying the landscape. Your world is wide and open, she said. My home is full of tall crystal towers and soft glowing light. It feels different. I've seen pictures, Mason said. It looks beautiful. There is beauty here too, she replied. Different but calming. Mason wasn't sure how to respond. No one had ever described the barren land around the outpost as calming before, but hearing it from her made him see it differently. They reached the crates and began loading them onto the small transport vehicle. Lyra tried to lift one on her own, but she underestimated the weight and stumbled slightly. Mason quickly steadied the crate before it tipped. Careful, he said. Some of these are heavier than they look. I thought I would be strong enough, she admitted, sounding disappointed. You are strong, Mason said quickly. But strength isn't just about lifting things. It's also about knowing your limits and working smart. She looked at him with quiet appreciation. Thank you for saying that. On the ride back, the wind was gentle, carrying dust across the open ground. Lyra watched the horizon thoughtfully, her glowing lines shifting into a softer shade. I must tell you something, she said after a long moment. Mason glanced at her. What is it? Before coming here, I was warned that humans might judge me, she said slowly. That I might not be accepted. I tried not to think about it, but I still worry. Mason didn't expect that. She had seemed so composed that he never imagined she was nervous. Well, he said honestly, I was worried too. Not about you, just about doing a good job. I'm not used to training someone from another world. I didn't want to mess things up. Lyra turned toward him with surprise. You were worried? He nodded. Yeah, but talking to you, I think it's going better than I expected. She smiled softly. I think so too. Those simple words created a shift between them, a quiet understanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and it mattered. When they returned to the base, it was time for performance drills. Mason and Lyra were supposed to move through a series of simple tasks while staying synchronized. At first, they fumbled. When Mason stepped to the left, Lyra stepped to the right. When she lowered her hand to activate a panel, Mason raised his. It almost looked like a mismatched dance. But then something changed. Mason slowed his movements, letting Lyra observe. Lyra adjusted her pace, matching his steps more closely. He spoke softly, explaining each motion, and she listened with full attention. Each time they repeated the sequence, they became more coordinated. By the fifth attempt, they moved almost perfectly in sync. Several soldiers watching from the sidelines exchanged surprised looks. Even Captain Rourke raised an eyebrow, impressed. After they finished, Lyra let out a soft breath of relief. We did better, yeah, Mason said, smiling. We did. They walked back toward the main corridor, both feeling quietly proud. The tension that had existed on the first day had softened. Now there was something warmer, something steady, building between them. Just as they reached the door, Lyra stopped and looked at Mason. "Thank you for being patient with me today," she said. "I know I made many mistakes." Mason shook his head. "You worked hard. That's what matters. And mistakes don't bother me. We're learning from each other. That's the whole point of this partnership." Her expression softened, touched by his words. "I am glad to have you as my guide. I'm glad to have you as my partner," Mason replied. As Lyra walked down the hallway toward her quarters, Mason watched her for a moment. Thinking about how much had changed in just one day, he realized something important. He didn't feel uncertain anymore. Instead, he felt motivated, maybe even excited to see how far they could go as a team. In her room, Lyra placed her hand on the wall panel, watching it glow in quiet patterns. She replayed the day in her mind, the mistakes, the learning, the conversations, the small moments of connection. She felt hopeful, maybe for the first time since arriving. Mason had treated her with respect, patience, and kindness. She respected him too. She lay down to rest, sensing that something meaningful was beginning to grow between them, bond built not simply by duty, but by trust slowly taking shape. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but now she knew she wouldn't face them alone. And that simple truth brought her peace. Mason woke up on the third morning feeling more confident about his partnership with Lyra. Over the last 2 days, she had shown dedication, curiosity, and a quiet strength that made training smoother and more enjoyable. He still wasn't sure where their partnership would lead, but he could sense they were slowly building something stable, something that felt like trust. When he arrived at the training yard, Lyra was once again early. She stood in the center of the field, practicing the movement pattern they had worked on the previous day. Her steps were precise and her breathing steady. She moved with a gentle glow tracing along her arms, responding to her focus. "You're getting better every day," Mason said as he approached. Lyra looked at him with a bright expression. "I wish to learn quickly." "Well, you're doing great." He grabbed a small data pad and checked the assignment details for the day. "Looks like we've got a scout mission." "Very simple. Just a walk along the mineral field to take readings." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "This is my first mission outside the base. It's nothing stressful," Mason reassured her. "Just observation." "We'll be back in a few hours," Lyra nodded, though he could see a flicker of uncertainty. The outside world was still new to her, but Mason felt confident that she was ready. They collected their gear and walked toward the transport vehicle. The early sun cast long shadows along the dusty ground, giving the outpost a soft golden glow. Lyra looked around with calm interest, occasionally pausing to observe the ground or the wind patterns. "I like how quiet it is out here," she said. "The air carries only natural sounds." "Yeah," Mason replied. "It's peaceful in its own way." The ride to the mineral field was smooth. The landscape around them slowly shifted from flat dirt to rocky patches scattered with shiny crystal fragments. The fields were known for producing harmless mineral dust that sparkled in light, making the entire area look like it had been sprinkled with tiny stars. When they reached the field, Lyra stepped out and looked around with wide eyes. "It looks like it is glowing." "Kind of is," Mason said with a chuckle. "Just a natural reflection. Nothing dangerous." They began walking, taking scans of the area. Mason explained each step with patience, and Lyra followed closely, asking questions when she needed to. She learned quickly, picking up the rhythm of the task with ease. But halfway through the mission, something unexpected happened. As they reached a section of uneven ground, Mason felt a soft tremor beneath his boots. He stopped. Lyra stopped too. "Did you feel that?" Mason asked. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, her fingertips brushing the ground. "The vibrations, they are shifting." "What does that mean?" "I am not certain," she said slowly, "but something below us is moving." Before Mason could respond, the ground beneath them suddenly cracked. It wasn't violent, but it was enough to take them by surprise. The earth gave way beneath their feet, dropping them down into darkness. They fell only a short distance before landing on soft soil, the sound of loose dirt sliding around them. Mason quickly checked himself. He was fine, just dusty. He turned to Lyra. "Are you okay?" She nodded, brushing dirt off her arms. I am unhurt." They both looked up. The surface was far above them now, too high to climb easily, and the edges of the hole were unstable. "Well, that wasn't part of the mission," Mason said dryly. Lyra smiled faintly, despite the situation. "No, it was not." They looked around. They had fallen into a tunnel, a wide, naturally formed cavern, lined with shimmering crystal walls. Light from above reflected through the crystals, giving the entire space a soft glow. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It is," Mason admitted. "But we need to find a way out." He checked his communicator, but there was no signal. The mineral-rich walls likely blocked it. Lyra tested the air, placing her hand against the ground. "I can sense faint vibrations leading in that direction," she said, pointing toward a tunnel opening. "They feel stable. Perhaps it leads upward." "Let's try it," Mason agreed. They walked slowly through the winding tunnels. The air was cool, and the soft crystal glow helped them see. Sometimes the path narrowed. Other times, it opened into large chambers filled with glittering formations. Lyra touched the walls gently, feeling the patterns inside the earth. "Your world has songs," she murmured. "Songs. The crystals. They hold little echoes. Not sound, but a feeling. It is like they remember the Earth's movements." Mason watched her with fascination. He had never thought about the planet like that. To him, it was just rock and dust. But Lyra made it sound alive. As they walked, they talked more openly than ever before. There was something about being underground and away from the noise of the base that made honest conversation easier. Lyra told him stories about her home's soft crystal gardens. Tall towers made of living stone and a sky that shone in colors humans had never seen. She spoke about her training, her teachers, and her desire to understand the universe beyond her world. Mason shared his own experiences. He told her about his family, his reasons for joining the service, how he sometimes felt overlooked even when he worked hard. He admitted he wasn't sure he was the best person to guide her. Lyra shook her head gently. "You are patient, calm, and steady. These qualities make a strong guide." Her words surprised him, but they warmed him too. As they continued walking, the tunnel began to slope upward. Lyra stopped suddenly. "Wait," she said softly. "The vibrations here. They feel unstable." Mason examined the ground. "Do you think it's safe?" "It might shift again," she said. "But there is a second path." She pointed to a narrow opening slightly hidden behind a cluster of crystals. Mason trusted her instincts. "Let's take that one." They squeezed through the narrow passageway, emerging into a larger, more stable chamber. From there, the path slowly curved upward. The air felt fresher. "I think we're close," Mason said. "Yes," Lyra replied, smiling softly. "We are moving toward the surface." After another short climb, they finally saw daylight filtering through a thin opening. Mason cleared the loose dirt with careful hands, widening the space enough for them to climb out. One step at a time, they emerged into the bright afternoon sun. They stood there for a moment, breathing in the open air. "We made it," Mason said with relief. Lyra looked at him with calm gratitude. "We did." He contacted the base once they reached open ground, and a rescue team arrived quickly. Captain Rourke checked them both for injuries, relieved they were unharmed. That evening, after everything settled, Mason and Lyra walked side by side back toward the training yard. The quiet between them didn't feel empty. It felt comfortable, full of a new understanding. Lyra stopped and looked at him. "Today, we had to trust each other," "Yeah," Mason said gently, "and I think we did." She nodded with a warm expression. "It makes our bond stronger." Mason knew she was right. Something important had shifted underground, something honest and natural. They had relied on each other not because of training, but because of genuine trust. And that trust was now the heart of their growing partnership. Their journey as a team had only begun, but already they had formed a connection far deeper than either of them expected. Mason woke up the next morning with a different feeling inside him. It wasn't worry, and it wasn't stress. It was something lighter, something warm. He realized it came from the trust he and Lyra had built the previous day while finding their way out of the underground tunnels. Working together in that strange place had changed something between them. They were still learning, still adjusting, but there was a new closeness forming, quiet but strong. When he stepped onto the training field, he noticed Lyra standing near a set of new equipment. She looked curious, studying a device shaped like a thin arc. Her glowing lines shifted gently as she examined it. "What's that?" Mason asked as he approached. "I am not sure," she admitted. "It appears to be a type of balance trainer." Mason checked the datapad. "Yeah, you're right. Looks like we're practicing coordination today." Lyra looked at him with a small smile. "I hope I can do well." "Well," he said confidently. "And if not, we'll figure it out together." Like always, she relaxed a little and they began their training session. The balance trainer required slow movement, stepping onto the curved surface and maintaining stability. Humans usually wobbled at first, and Mason expected Lyra to struggle, but she surprised him again. Her movements were steady, light, and almost effortless. Even when the device rocked slightly, she adjusted with grace, keeping her posture calm and fluid. "You're good at this," Mason said. Lyra stepped off the trainer. "It feels similar to a balance practice we do on my world." "Well, that explains it," he said with a grin. "Maybe you should be the one teaching me this time." She tilted her head, thoughtful. "If you wish, I can show you the way we do it." Mason agreed, curious. Lyra demonstrated a gentle method of stepping, using soft, sweeping motions that allowed her to center her weight naturally. Mason tried copying her, but at first he looked stiff. "You are thinking too much," she said gently. "I can't help it," he admitted. "Try feeling the movement instead of controlling it." Her advice wasn't something he was used to hearing. Human training often focused on precision and rules, not on feeling, but Mason trusted her. He closed his eyes for a moment, listened to the soft hum of the trainer beneath his feet, and allowed his body to adjust slowly. Lyra watched him calmly. "Better," she said softly. By the time he stepped off, he felt surprisingly balanced. "Okay, that actually helped." Lyra smiled, pleased. "We learned from each other." It was true. They were becoming more than a guide and a trainee. They were becoming a team. Later in the day, they were assigned a shared task inside the observation tower. Their job was to monitor environmental changes and update the system logs. It wasn't physical training, but it required focus. Lyra sat beside Mason at the control table, watching the holographic displays with interest. "These readings change quickly," she said. "They do," Mason replied. "This area has unpredictable weather." Lyra leaned closer to the screen. "On my world, our systems adjust themselves automatically. We do not have to correct them manually." "That sounds convenient," Mason said. "It is. But your systems let you understand the changes more deeply." Mason paused. "I never thought about it like that." She looked up at him. "Your world teaches patience," he chuckled. "Does yours teach speed?" "In harmony," she added softly. They worked together, entering data and adjusting settings. Mason explained each step in simple words, and Lyra listened carefully. When she made a small mistake typing a value to HFY, she immediately corrected it. "I am grateful you explained things clearly," she said quietly. "I'm trying my best," Mason replied. "You make it easier to teach." Their shoulders nearly touched as they leaned over the same console, and Mason noticed how natural their closeness felt now. Not forced, not awkward, just comfortable. In the afternoon, they headed to the dining hall for a break. Lyra still found human food strange, but she tried new things each day. Today, Mason picked something mild, a fruit blend in a soft container. "Try this," he said. "It's sweet." She squeezed it gently, tasting the flavor. Her glowing lines brightened slightly. "It is pleasant." Mason laughed. "That means you like it." "Yes," she said softly. "I do." They ate together, watching other soldiers move around the hall. A few of them glanced at Lyra with curiosity, but no one seemed unfriendly. Still, Lyra looked a little unsure. "People are just curious," Mason assured her. "They're still getting used to this program." Lyra nodded. "It is strange being watched." "Yeah," Mason agreed. "But they'll get used to you. People just need time." She looked at him. "You help me feel welcome." Her words surprised him again. Mason wasn't used to being thanked so openly. "I'm glad," he he said quietly. You deserve to feel like you belong here. That seemed to mean something to her. She sat there for a moment, thoughtful, as if she was slowly understanding her place in this new environment. After their break, Captain Rourke called them into the main hall. You two will assist with communication checks today, he said. We're preparing for a large interspecies meeting next month. We need everything running smoothly. Understood, Mason replied. Lyra listened attentively, ready to help. They spent hours testing signal frequencies, cleaning old devices, and adjusting cables. Each task brought them closer. Sometimes Mason guided Lyra's hands to show her how to open a panel. Sometimes Lyra pointed out patterns in the data that Mason hadn't noticed. Their teamwork felt natural, like they had been partners for much longer. At one point, Mason climbed onto a small platform to reach a higher device. Lyra handed him tools one by one, watching him carefully. You trust me more now, she said gently. Mason nodded. Yeah, I do. And I trust you, she said. He felt something warm settle in his chest at those words. As the day ended, the sky turned softly orange. Mason and Lyra walked outside together, the evening breeze brushing past them. The outpost lights flickered on, sending long shadows across the ground. Lyra stopped near the edge of the yard, looking toward the horizon. The colors of your sky are different than mine, she said. Yours feels warm. Gentle. What's your sky like? Mason asked. Brighter, she replied. Full of shifting lights? But sometimes, I like the soft calm here. Mason stood beside her, watching the last bit of sunlight fade. I like that you're starting to feel comfortable. It's because you guide me with patience, she said softly. On my world, I was trained to follow structure. Here, I learned to adapt. You help me with that. I'm just doing my best, Mason said, feeling a quiet pride. She turned to him, her expression warm. Your best is kind. That matters. They walked back toward the base, their steps falling naturally in rhythm, no training needed. A gentle bond had grown between them, not forced by duty, but formed through shared days, shared challenges, and shared understanding. Mason realized something important. He didn't just see Lyra as a trainee anymore. He saw her as a partner, someone he cared about, respected, and trusted deeply. Lyra felt it too. This world was still new and sometimes confusing, but with Mason beside her, it no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt steady. It felt safe. The bond between them, once uncertain, had now become something strong, something that would guide them through whatever came next. After the emergency was finally under control, the outpost returned to its usual routines, but nothing felt the same. People walked differently. They spoke differently. And most importantly, they looked at Lyra differently. Days ago, many soldiers kept a distance from her, unsure of how to behave around someone from another species. Some were polite but guarded, while others whispered behind her back. But now, the same people nodded respectfully when she passed. Some even stopped her to say thank you, a word she rarely heard before. Lyra was not used to such open appreciation. In her culture, praise was given only on special occasions or by elders. So every time someone thanked her, she paused, unsure how to reply, and then gave a small smile. The outpost felt warmer, friendlier, and more welcoming. And the person who stood at the center of all this change was Mason. He did not expect any reward. But his brave decision to speak up for her and his teamwork during the crisis had reached the higher command. Officers who once doubted him now discussed his leadership potential seriously. Mason tried to keep his routine the same, but inside he felt something changing. He had always tried to be reliable, but now people trusted him with real responsibility. One morning, Commander Rake called both Mason and Lyra to the main briefing hall. They expected another report or follow-up meeting about the damaged grid. But when they walked in, the atmosphere was different. Several senior officers were present, including the liaison officer responsible for communication with the Varen homeworld. When they were asked to stand at the center, Mason felt the room go quiet. Commander Reich stepped forward and spoke in a firm but respectful tone. He explained that both Masan and Lyra had shown exceptional teamwork, bravery, and dedication. Not just during the crisis, but throughout their entire time working together. He said their bond had changed, the way many humans viewed the Varen and encouraged trust that no speech or training program had ever achieved. Then came the announcement that surprised them both. Mason was being promoted, and not just to a slightly higher rank, he was being placed in charge of the first official human-Varine joint unit. This unit would be responsible for missions that required skill, communication, and understanding between the two species. It was going to be an example for future cooperation, and the success of the entire program depended on the leader chosen. Mason felt like the floor moved under him. He had always wondered if he was good enough to lead. Now he wasn't just being offered a small leadership role, he was being put at the front of history. But before he could speak, Commander Rake added something even more meaningful. Lyra was officially invited to become his second in command. Lyra froze. She had prepared herself mentally to return to her homeworld almost every day. Even though she had grown closer to the humans, she believed she would eventually have to leave. Her people expected her return. Her training, her duties, her family, they all waited for her. But now, an unexpected path stretched in front of her. The room waited for her reaction. She swallowed softly and finally asked, "May I choose freely? Without pressure?" Commander Rake nodded. These few seconds felt heavy for Lyra. She silently remembered the young warrior. She used to be the one who avoided humans, mistrusted them, and kept her distance from everything unfamiliar. She also remembered the long nights trapped in the cave, the open conversations she shared with Mason, the fears she confessed, and the trust that grew quietly between them. And she realized something important. She no longer saw Mason as just a partner in training. She saw him as a true ally, someone who understood her better than many in her own society ever had. The thought of leaving this bond behind felt wrong. It's almost painful. So she took a deep breath and answered clearly, "I wish to stay. I want to continue working with Sergeant Mason." The room murmured with approval, and even Mason felt his chest loosen with relief. He had tried to stay neutral, but deep inside he wanted her to stay too. The missions, the routines, the conversations, they all felt incomplete without her presence. After the ceremony, when the room had emptied, Mason and Lyra stepped out into the cool afternoon air. They walked slowly along the outpost's perimeter, not in a rush, just taking in the moment. The sky above them glowed with a soft mix of human daylight and alien. Atmospheric shimmer, perfect symbol of their blended worlds. Mason finally spoke. "You sure about this? Staying, I mean? I know your people might want you back." Lyra looked up at him, her expression calm, but sincere. "Yes, I want to return someday. But not now. There is more for me to learn here, and more for us to achieve together." Mason smiled. Not a big, dramatic smile, just a quiet one that showed genuine appreciation. Over the next few weeks, their new responsibilities began. Mason attended leadership meetings, learning how to manage mixed species teams, study cooperation protocols, and organize missions that required both human tactics and Varen sensory skills. Lyra trained alongside him, offering insights from her culture and helping refine strategies. They were different in many ways, but those differences became strengths. Lyra's calm thinking balanced Mason's action-oriented mindset. Mason's logical planning worked well with Lyra's instinctive sensitivity. Together, they led their unit with precision, kindness, a bond that others admired. The more they worked, the more they realized that their partnership had become something greater than a military assignment. It had grown into a symbol proof that two completely different beings could support, respect, and understand each other deeply. Stories about them began spreading across both worlds, on human stations. Soldiers repeated tales about the calm alien warrior and the thoughtful human soldier who trained flawlessly together. On the Varen homeworld, elders spoke of the young warrior who crossed borders and built trust with a species once feared. Their examples slowly improved communication. Between the two societies, cooperation programs increased. More mixed teams were formed. Suspicion and hesitation faded little by little. But even with all this recognition, Mason and Lyra stayed humble. They never pretended to be heroes. They simply worked hard, trusted each other, and tried to do what was right every day. One quiet evening at the outpost. After a long training session, they stood by the observation deck, watching the horizon turn golden. The wind carried a peaceful silence around them. Lyra spoke first. "Do you ever think about how this all began?" Mason chuckled. "Yeah, I remember thinking you didn't want to be anywhere near me." "You weren't wrong," Lyra admitted softly. "But I'm glad things changed." "Me too," Mason replied. Their journey had not been easy. It had doubts, misunderstandings, challenges, and unexpected lessons. But every step brought them closer, built trust, and shaped a bond stronger than fear or difference. And in the end, their bond didn't just change them, it changed the path of humans and Varen for the future. A human soldier and an alien companion, once reluctant strangers, had become a team that inspired unity across worlds. Their partnership proved something important. Understanding begins with one small connection, and dedication can build a bridge that lasts a lifetime. Their story was far from over. But this chapter, this remarkable chapter, had set the foundation for everything that would come next.